really good advice. And I guess from my side, when did you first hear about the in-house route as a career path? Was it in early law school, which I found when I went to law school, so I done the GDL and LPC. I didn't know anything about the in-house
No.
route, and it wasn't very well established in those law schools that was an option for people that maybe didn't want to have the sort of traditional. Hi, it's Gianpaolo Pisiti from J Group. Today, we're very, very lucky to have an experienced general counsel that's going to give us an overview of the role of GC, his career path today, and some advice he would give to junior legal professionals in the market who might be considering moving in-house or having a career in legal. So would you like to introduce yourself, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Matt Cockcroft. I've done a mix of general counsel work and through to managing partner work in private practice. Really, really brief summary. I started with Alan Overy. My first day was when Lehman Brothers went under, so that was a pretty busy start. First day was to come out of the underground to see people leaving with their boxes and realizing that I was going into the securitization team, hopefully to then be fixing it. So absolute baptism of fire. I had a great time at A&O and had two or three secondments, which I think we'll go on to started me off on the in-house route. I then took a complete shift. Went in-house after about 2 3 years qualified. I went to Lloyd's of London with no insurance background whatsoever, but to go in there to do sort of real mix of corporate commercial work and other bits. I stayed at Lloyd's for about 6.5 years. And while there, went off and did things like my MBA and a few other ventures, but got heavily involved in the innovation side of things, looking at the Lloyd's Lab, the Innovation Awards, that side of things. That led me to effectively a deputy GC role at Simply Business, which is one of the Travelers subsidiaries, again in insurance, working for an amazing general counsel there, Joanne Theodoulou, who really took me on and developed me. Then took my first general counsel role for an insurance group, CLS, which was as Brexit and COVID hit together. I think we can come on to that one in a little bit more detail later. And then my more recent role, I actually went back into private practice to head up a tech specialist law firm, and spent the last sort of 2.5 years doing a complete sort of overhaul and set up for them going forward.
Yeah, brilliant. I guess from my side, what made you pursue a career in law? Did you go straight into it from finishing school, or was it more a sort of the sort of GDL route after doing another degree?
So I did history and Spanish, nothing law related at all. And my background in law, I come from a family of lawyers. My father was a lawyer, and I think I probably ended up in law, in spite of his advice to look to anything else other than the law. But I mean, all jokes aside, I got to sort of the end of my second year at uni. I lived with some really, really great guys who were very ambitious, looking for particular roles that they wanted to go into, and I think they were very instrumental in pushing me towards really going for the top training contracts and seeing what I could secure. I was very, very lucky to be taken on by A&O. And I think I looked at that stage, still not 100% sure that law was necessarily everything that I ever wanted to do, but to have the opportunity and privilege to go and work for a firm like that, to frankly be put through law school and all of the other bits that go with it, and to take on that professional qualification, it just seemed a no-brainer for me to do that, and everything sort of run from there, I suppose.
One thing that you said that really resonated with me and my journey was when you mentioned the group of people that sort of dragged you on. And I have a stepson, and one thing I say to him on a sort of consistent basis is it's really important who you put in your circle of people. So because I have a similar story to you. So when I was at school, my parents had a business, and it was the sort of path was for me to take the family business over, small family business, and when I was at high school, I wasn't really trying and I wasn't really pushing myself, and I decided to make a very conscious change in that point to put myself with this other group of people who were all aspiring to go to university, and nobody in my sort of lineage had ever gone to university or anything like that. And I remember I started trying really, really hard, and ended up getting into Glasgow University, and that was a big sort of step for me. And if I hadn't made that change, I would have never done that. So that definitely resonated with myself.
It's absolutely vital. I mean, the not in the same way at all, but I think my setup at the time, I went to university. I chose university to play sport. I was a mad keen hockey player, and that was the natural progression for me from sort of school, club, etc. sports. And the first year and a half, I I mucked around, and you do, and that it was a whole load of fun. And the lot that I lived with, they showed me that you could both do the work hard, play hard, but they would actually literally get out of bed in the morning and go and do something, whether it was go and study, whether it was go and do whatever else, rather than just loaf around. And I think I was very, very lucky to have that as the environment that I was living in, actually in my second, not my third year, to give me that jolt to say, actually, you've only got 18 months left before you're out of here. What does the next stage look like? You need to get on with it sooner rather than later. And frankly, it could take you years to get a training contract. You need to start knuckling down now. You might get lucky and get it really, really quickly. But if not, let's say it's going to take you 3 years to get the training contract. Start now, and then it's only 18 months after you finished that you're then sort of kicking on after uni.
No, it's completely good advice. And I guess from my side, when did you first hear about this, the in-house route as a career path? Was it in early law school, which I found when I went to law school, so I done the GDL and LPC. I didn't know anything about the in-house
No.
route, and it wasn't very well established in those law schools that was an option for people that maybe didn't want to have the sort of traditional, training contract, private practice, associate, senior associate, and then partner route. Would you be able to give us some sort of insight on
That resonates entirely with me. Likewise, I did GDL and LPC. I can't remember once hearing anything about in-house, whether that was an in-house career or even that you could train and qualify in-house.
that?
No, I mean, didn't hear anything of it at all. Um, my first taste of it was at A&O. My third seat, I think it probably was. Just before I went into that seat, one of the associates in that department had been on secondment to JP Morgan, and was due to come back. And the partner that I was due to sit with came and found me, and she did actually ask. I mean, rather than just telling me, but she said, "Look, I'm fairly confident that you haven't done." Sort of an in-house or secondment seat before, but we've got this space at JP Morgan for I think it was about 6 or 8 weeks. Would you like to go? It's like, yeah, sounds great. Um, and and I think that would be one of my bits of advice going forwards. If opportunities come up, even if you have absolutely no idea what it's about, whether you can do it, whatever else, say yes and have a go.
Mhm.
Um, and I went across to the JP Morgan team and loved the environment. Really loved the environment. The work was hard. It certainly wasn't a I think soft option as
Mm.
at the time, I think a lot of people looked at the in-house role as being a soft option. It
Mhm.
wasn't. It was just as hard and highbrow as working in private practice. But I think having come back from that as an experience, I then started to look for where there might be other opportunities. And where it really then kicked in for me, I actually applied for the only overseas client secondment
Mhm.
for my final seat. So I could have applied for the overseas A&O offices, but I really wanted the client work. And I went and spent 6 months with an American petrochemicals company just outside Brussels,
Mm.
just before I qualified, doing a lot of commercial IP work, etc. And I think I probably moved over to the dark side at that point.
I think definitely something that resonates with me, having spoke to many lawyers who have either considered moving in house or are in that sort of journey. One of the things that I hear on a sort of regular basis is that that sort of client secondment. That secondment is where there's sort of that baptism of fire happens with regards to seeing a different side to the legal profession. And another thing that resonated with me was that easy option. I've heard this many times in the sort of traditional partners who I don't want to say it's a little bit of a toxic thing, but a little bit of a you're going in and taking an easy role, you're not made out for private practice, and that sort of resentment. Not so much now, but in the past, that's definitely something I've heard about. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Mm.
Um, I think it's changed. But I mean, 15, 10, 15, 20 years ago, yes, I think that perception was pervasive.
Mm.
I see it very differently. I see the roles as just being fundamentally different,
Mm.
rather than one being easier or harder than the other.
Mm.
Um, by way of example on it, if you are if you are a private practice sector specialist and you then go and do an element of that work in-house for a client, then yes, potentially, depending on the complexity of the issue that that client has, then yes, it might be an easier option for you as a one-off.
Mm.
However, what happens about all of the other things that hit your desk that you have not practiced for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years that you sit there and think, I haven't seen that since law school. And I think it then comes to a different mentality. So I think from the private practice perspective, the comfort and the interest and the confidence in your chosen area is absolutely vital. And you become that specialist, you become the surgeon.
Mm.
On the in-house side, I think it requires a completely different mindset. I think you need to be interested in a much broader spread of not just the law, but also regs, compliance, risk, the business generally.
Mm.
And again, I don't want to do this as a generalization because there are some amazing private practice partners and associates that do this.
Mm.
But generally, I would expect the in-house lawyer to be a little bit more comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm. I mean that resonates with me. So I worked about 4 years as was an in-house paralegal. And the difference in skill set is not skill set's not correct. A difference in the role.
Yeah.
So I mean, for example, in-house, one day you'd be reviewing the office printer agreement, and the next, you're dealing with we were buying, 60 wind turbines across Scotland. Or, when I was at CBRE, there was a merger. Sorry, not merger. We were buying another company, and it was the amount of calls and with external counsel, etc. It's a very different sort of environment, because you can be dealing with the CEO one day, and then the next you're dealing with someone in the sales team. Or so you have to be able to uh, and I think this resonates with me on the conversations that I have with general counsels when they're recruiting, is someone that's adaptable, that has that sort of personality where maybe they're not too corporate, in the sense that their ability to sort of jump between the two is quite important. And those are the people that I feel really sort of adapt to the in-house market.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think it's also that your speed of jumping from one thing to the
Mm,
next. I mean, and again, this is a broad generalization, but from a private practice perspective, often you have unless you're actually on the client site, you have the ability to just pause for that 1 second when the
mm,
email hits your inbox, or to leave the meeting, go away and talk to colleagues, come back, etc. I'm not saying you can't do that in-house, but very frequently, whether it's the CEO, a marketing exec, whoever it happens to be in the business, will just will just want your initial gut read on something,
mm,
to almost see what the reaction is on your face when they bring this thing to you,
mm,
as to whether they can take it forwards. And as you say, you might just have come out of a meeting with external counsel on a merger, and you're walking down the corridor and someone from HR says, "Oh, we've got an issue. Could this be going down a grievance or a disciplinary route?" And you've
yeah,
got to switch in that moment into
mm.
it, maybe not to give full advice, but to be comfortable to switch between the two and give that initial comfort, that hand holding to the business, because frankly, that's what you're there for.
And I guess probably a good sort of explanation of what a general counsel actually is, would be good for the sort of audience of maybe the people who haven't, really understood the in-house market to date. And general counsel is a term, but traditionally it means something very strategic. And I guess you'd be in the best position to sort of give an overview of what a general counsel is in a traditional sense.
Yeah. Okay. So the role varies hugely depending on scale, complexity of the business, the sector it's in, etc. You might have a GC in a heavily regulated area that is spending way more time on regs compliance, etc., rather than what we might think of as traditional legal work. In a smaller entity, or in a sort of fast growth entity, they may be spending way more time on the commercial contracts, the business development, marketing side of things. Very, very varied. But where I would see the general counsel is that strategic advisor to the board or to exec. Yes, they happen to be a lawyer, and they happen to have that, you would hope, really strong legal background, but their role is to process and translate the business issues and the associated legal issues,
Mhm,
bring them together, and actually to be able to talk that through with the board, with the exec, and say to them, look, this is what it means. This is where some of the risks are. This is how you can address some of those risks. But actually, with some of those risks, there's a huge opportunity here if you do X, Y, or Z. So I'm giving you, let's say, three options. My advice, and this is the really important bit about the GC, it's getting off the fence
mhm,
and saying, I've given you the three options. With an exec hat on,
mhm.
that's the one I think we should go for, and this is why. But at the end of the day, it's a board or it's an exec decision, and you tell me what it is you want to do. Now, I think where sometimes the GC role can be a little bit confusing for those coming into the industry is seeing the GC as the head of legal. Now, what I mean by that is, again, depending on the scale of the entity, I would usually see the head of legal as the name would suggest, heading up the legal team, almost exclusively dealing with legal issues, dealing with contract management, dealing with the associated liability, but largely staying in lane. Where the GC role spreads beyond that, it will often have the compliance team reporting in, maybe the risk team if they're not reporting into the CFO. Quite often, a lot of company secretarial work that will go with it, and again, very distinct from legal. And then the strategy, the business, the commercial acumen that needs to be put on top of, I say just, I don't mean this in that sense, but the more limited head of legal role.
And you touched on a point that I've seen over the last sort of 3, 4 years, and before that as well, is I guess the dilution of the GC title. And what I mean by that is it sort of merging between those lines of, a head of legal, general counsel, and not, at different companies they mean different things. You could be a head of legal at, a massive company and have a lot more responsibility than a general counsel at a smaller company. So, we've definitely seen that sort of evolution of the GC title. And what we've seen in the last sort of few years is the sort of rise of the chief legal officer to
Yeah.
sort of combat that sort of distinction. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I've at different points. I think I've operated in almost all of those job titles.
Mm,
The I think where the major confusion comes in is confusing general counsel with sole counsel.
mm,
That I do worry about a little bit in the industry.
mm,
Almost by definition, if you're sole counsel, it's very difficult to be general counsel because you're so buried on the day-to-day grind of the contracts, the advice, etc., that you don't actually have an opportunity to sit up, have a look around, look at the strategy, think about the key stakeholders, what are they after? Do you, with the best in the world, actually just need to go for a coffee with one of them and put their mind at rest about X, Y, or Z? Because that soft side of the role is so important to keep the business going. But when you look at the different scales of the business, I'll give the prime example. The head of legal at Lloyd's sitting below the GC is doing a role way broader than and I do mean a GC in a scale up. I mean, it's a huge job, but it's a head of legal role where the GC is then really sitting alongside it's the council at Lloyd's, but effectively with the board, not so much in the day to day of what's going on. The CLO role, the chief legal officer role, again, I think it's a really interesting one, but it's starting to get into sort of minutiae on corporate governance
mm,
because to me, and I know there are different viewpoints on this, but to me, the general counsel sits independently from the board and provides advice to the board.
mm,
The chief legal officer, again, depending on how it's constructed, is often actually appointed as a director on the board. And so you start to wear two hats. You start to wear well, I am the ranking legal person within the business, so I need to advise the business. But now I need to take that hat off, put on the director's hat, and to then proceed with my fellow directors. I do wonder whether sometimes that brings in a bit of a conflict,
mm,
actually. But it's all morphing so fast at the moment. I would be less I'd be less concerned about the job title, but really for anyone that's aspiring to those head of legal, GC, CLO type roles, really look at what it is the business is looking for from the role. Forget the title. What is it day to day that they're really looking for? And I think that will give you the steer as to whether you're ready for it, which bits you think you need to upskill on, and all that side of things.
Kind of stole my next question a little bit. I was gonna ask you with regards to if there's a junior lawyer working out in London somewhere or even in the UK, and they have aspirations to be a head of legal or general counsel, what would you say is the sort of main skills they should really focus on developing to sort of get up to that sort of level?
Uh, I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask on this because I have quite an a sort of extreme view on it. Uh, let's go back 10, 15 years. The traditional side of it, I would be saying, if you're looking to go for that role within your existing business, and there is a real split here. If you're going with your existing business, then my advice would be to get involved in as many different areas of the business as you possibly can to understand the first, the legal, second, the regulatory, third, the compliance, but fourth, maybe not in that order, the business requirements from those different areas so that you're so familiar across the board and you've done transactions, you've provided advice in all of these different areas that you are then the obvious choice for promotion when that GC role becomes available rather than it going to an external hire.
Mm.
If
And
you're looking to, sorry, go for it.
no, go ahead. Sorry,
If
finish your point.
you're looking to move from where you are into another GC role, actually, I think that that's massively changed. Years and years ago, I would have been saying, look, you've got to be absolutely airtight across the board on the legals. It's not good enough to be good at corporate commercial. You've got to be able to be familiar with litigation, with fundraising, with employment, all of those different bits. Now, I can't help but think that it's almost entirely different. To me, the skill sets that are needed for the GC are those that Dan Kane, etc., are pushing so hard with O-shaped lawyer. You've got to be so much more rounded. The the legal, regulatory, compliance, etc. Those are table stakes now. Anywhere you go, it's a given that you can do those bits. But it's then what else do you offer to it? Can you show commercial acumen? Can you show your ability uh, to deal with significant conflict between stakeholders? Can you show that you are adept at strategy? Do you have sufficient gravitas at board? Because fine, 6 months down the line, you've had a chance to establish yourself. But what do those first 2 weeks look like as you join those board meetings, as you join those exco meetings? And those aren't things that you're taught at law school, unfortunately. My huge advice would be if you're able to find someone that can be a mentor to you through it, so that you can bounce those ideas off and say, how do you think I'm doing with this? Which bits do I need to tighten up? And which bits actually are real strengths that I'm not bringing to the fore?
No, it's really good advice. And I guess the really is that sort of resource out there, unless you have really good, contacts in the industry. So, it's a very valid point. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, when you moved up to that sort of head of legal or general counsel role, did you ever experience imposter syndrome? And this is I wrote a post about this, and it kind of went a bit viral in the sort of legal community because it resonated with quite a lot of people. So it's a question that I've always, found really interesting because, it's something that I've experienced in the past when you jump into a new role and it's the first few days and you think, oh, I'm a general counsel or whatever it is that you're moving into.
Yeah, absolutely. So I made that step up as I move from Simply Business across to CLS, I must give massive thanks and credit to the GC at Simply Business, Joanne Theodulu. Um, she she spent so much time and effort investing in my development so that I could be ready. I say loosely ready to step up to that GC role. And without that, I'm not sure that I would have been prepared to do that in my whatever it was, early to mid 30s. But I took that role at CLS in, was it January or February 2020, and we just had we were dealing with Brexit, and then it was 6 weeks after I started, COVID hit, and so I had turned up, I thought, really well briefed, well prepared. I had my 100-day plan. I knew that I was going to go in and listen and not speak and all of those other bits. And I quite literally had to rip it up and
Yeah.
just start again. And I do remember sitting in our offices in London when my new business cards arrived on my desk, and I looked at them and went, that says General Counsel on it. Um, okay, I can do this, but it becomes increasingly it does become increasingly lonely as you go into those more senior roles. And I think speaking to others that have trodden a relatively similar path, I think one of the hardest things to learn, and everyone has to learn it for themselves, you can't be told it and do it, is having, I think you step up to the GC and you think, well, I'm the GC now, so everyone expects me to be the GC, so I can't show weakness. If I show weakness, then it's all going to fall apart. And that, honestly, that is the worst approach you can take, because you then try to do everything yourself or by yourself, and we're all human. We all make mistakes all day, every day. And actually, I realized that I had two or three members of my team at different levels of seniority who actually knew the business way better than I did, knew where the bear traps were, knew where the skeletons were, all the rest of it. And as I started to, certainly internally, open up to the fact that I didn't have all the answers, that I could go to them and ask for help, my life became so much easier, so much more comfortable. But at the same time, they stepped up. So they started really moving faster in their roles, enjoying their roles, and it comes down to that team element. The team then starts to function better. It's not a one person show. You are there to champion your team. You're there to support your team, to develop your team. If you're doing it as the big I am GC, I wish you well, because it's very lonely.
That's really good advice. Um, one of the questions I wanted to move on to was, where do you see the sort of evolution of, AI in legal in the next sort of 10, 15, even 5 years, to be honest? Do you see it as a big integral part of, the legal team going forward?
Uh, I'm going to stop you slightly on AI. I'm going to go with tech more generally. AI plays a massive part in it, um, but I think it needs to be looked at holistically. The short answer is yes, tech and AI, it's already transforming the industry, transforming roles. I think it's already actually starting to transform the structure of external offerings to businesses on their resourcing, on their focus on talent, on the seniority, etc. But one thing that I've heard said quite a few times, I think is absolutely right. those lawyers who do not adopt tech and
Mm,
AI will be replaced by those who do. I think it is as straightforward as that. It's not an option.
mm,
We all need to, at different levels and different speeds, become familiar with, become comfortable with, and actually really start to take advantage of tech and AI. You said 5 years down the line. I mean, I'm looking back even eight. How long's ChatGPT been out now? I
about
mean,
two
not
years.
not that long. I was about to say 18 months, 2 years.
Yeah.
18 months, 2 years ago. I mean, most of us, yeah, fine, we'd heard the term AI, but it was this uh, just this ethereal term, and no one knew what it was going to do. And then that turned up, and almost overnight, things changed. Now, I actually think it's changed massively for the positive,
Yeah.
but again, because I'm at the more senior end of my career, I think it's to my advantage. So
Mm,
a lot of the a lot of the more time a lot of the work that just takes a lot of time to be able to use tech generally, but an AI tool to streamline that for you, or
mm,
to have workflows in place, automation in the background a from a contract management system or whatever else it happens to be. That's career changing for someone, I
mm.
think, certainly mid to senior, because you can then focus way more on the real value add of the human, which is the human interaction, the strategy, putting the different bits together, that gut feel on things.
Mm.
Where I where I'm not sure, and this is probably more from my more recent sort of dip back into private practice, I'm not sure where that leaves the juniors. And
Mm.
that's probably the bit that concerns me a little bit. And I'm a massive, massive fan of working remotely, hybrid, and all the rest of it. But to me, the combination of the remote and hybrid work and the increasing power and reliability of tech and I think it's going to make it even harder for juniors to learn through the profession. Um, Now, and I suppose this then goes on to what would my advice be on it. I don't think that just legal skills are going to be enough for lawyers operating in the profession, in-house going forwards. I think you have to have that interest in all of the associated elements, whether it's tech, whether it's AI, whether it's what different business processes someone's bringing through, what have been changes in strategy, whatever else it happens to be, and to open yourself up to all of those and see if you can create your own way of bringing all of these tools together, working almost behind the scenes for you, so that your delivery is then really, really strong.
Yeah, I think on my personal point of view, there's a lot of will it replace lawyers and chat out there. I don't think it'll replace lawyers. I think it'll make them more efficient.
Yep.
And if it's used correctly, it can make you a lot more efficient in your day to day. I use ChatGPT a lot to sort of, a lot of the mundane tasks like structuring a CV or something like that, can be done through ChatGPT, right? And you can fix simple formatting issues, etc., which would take time for someone. So yeah, I think it's been vastly positive. I guess how it's implemented in businesses going forward will be the sort of key aspect going forward to see what happens. But I'm an advocate for it. I really think it's been a bit of a game changer for myself with regards to just buying back some time from doing mundane tasks. So I'm not going to speak bad about it.
No,
Definitely
no,
a
I'm
fan.
not either. But honestly, even were we to do that, I think it's a fruitless task. I mean, it's here. It's not going anywhere. We're only
Absolutely.
seeing we're seeing the tip of the iceberg on what is going to be possible. And I would so encourage as many people as possible. Yes, okay, to be cognizant of the downside risk on it, of course, but to really see it as an opportunity and to allow you to look to do different things through your career rather than looking at it as, is it going to take my job? It might take the job you've got today in the form that you're doing it today, but what does your job look like in a week or a month or a year's time?
Absolutely. I want to move on to the next stage and the last stage, which is the sort of quick fire questions, few word answers, just to get your sort of, perception on certain aspects. So the first one would be, what's the biggest misconception that you found about the GC role? That could be from, at a barbecue and, someone saying, what do you do for a career? I'm a GC. And, you know,
Well, the quick answer on that is that the best way to stop someone talking to you at a dinner party is when they ask you what you do to say, I'm a GC in insurance. I mean, you just see them switch off completely. I think probably the biggest misconception is that grey person, that grey man, the oh my God, it's boring, and you're there to say no. And I'd like to think that we're past that now. I think enough people can see that that's just not the case. But yeah, that's the one that really strikes me.
and one other question I had was, if you could go back 10, 15 years to a younger self, what advice would you give from your experience today to that younger self?
Um, that's a really good question. I I think I would probably tell myself to stop thinking about fixating on and worrying about a Route One career, and to get yourself comfortable with it. Now, I made the choice to step out of the trainee, associate, partner, etc. route through private practice, which you can still do. You can still do. But I think if you're interested potentially in an in-house role, I think the starting point needs to be to think my career is going to shift, change, morph so many times, and that's okay. And it really is that reassurance to yourself that it's okay. And you might go from head of legal to general counsel. You may want to stay there. You may want to do what actually the CEO that I sat under at CLS did, which was to do GC, COO, CEO. You could say, actually, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go into risk. Or you could do what so many of my lot seem to have done, which is to get to that GC role or really, really senior and then say, you know what, actually, I'm not going to practice law anymore. I'm going to go and do something in a business because I've brought together so many skills over the years that actually I can be a really good leader of a business now. Maybe not a CEO, but I can go and run my own business. Great thing to go and do.
I think that the advice I would give my younger self was, don't close doors to opportunities. That could be, going to a dinner party after work when you're tired and you can't be bothered. Because you don't know who you'll meet there. I was very much like that in my early career, where I was tired. London's a grind. You finish late. There's this event, and you just want to go home and relax. But some of those events that I have gone to have been fantastic for networking and building relationships with people that I've still got relationships with, who touch base with me regularly. And some of them have become my clients as well. And I think that's the best advice I would give myself, would be, don't close doors on opportunities to network.
I That is absolutely spot on. And actually, I think it almost takes us full circle, going back to your much earlier point about the people that you surround yourself with.
Mm,
Because again, I think certainly through law school and my training contract, it was impressed on us that
mm,
networking was almost a tool so that you could get something. So you go and network so that someone becomes a client or
yeah.
whatever else it happens to be. But actually, it doesn't need to be that. And just surrounding yourself by interesting people, as you say, it opens doors, it opens opportunities that you might never have known about before. And what have you got to lose? Just go. Have a go.
And I think, that touches on a point is, especially for, I guess, junior lawyers working in private practice, there's that sort of emphasis to go there, win business. The biggest experience that I've learned is people buy from people they like, not
Yeah,
people that try to sell them stuff. If you're likable and you're personable and engaging, people will gravitate towards you and they want to do business with you. And that's one of the things I've definitely learned. Um,
definitely. I couldn't
so
agree more.
um, I'm going to end the podcast there. I want to thank you so much for your time. I think it's been really insightful.
No, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll end it there. Thank you very much for your time.